Hi, Geoff Lawton here, and I'm at the Green in the Desert site in Jordan. And this is Discover Permaculture, the podcast. And we are going to talk about this particular site because I'm here and so is Sam Parker Davis. But let me introduce firstly Eric Sider. He's in Sacramento, California. But Eric, you spent quite a few years, well, quite a bit of time here in the early days, 2009, and things were pretty early then. And he put in some hard yards, and it was during a time when there was a conflict in Gaza. Gaza was getting bombed at that time as well. And then 10 years later, Sam arrived. So from 2009 with Eric to 2019 with Sam's arrival, and the place was a lot more developed in those 10 years and has continued developing. So then we have Ben. So Ben Missimer is in, so you're in Mississippi, aren't you, Ben? And you haven't been here, but you've mapped the place intensely for me in many ways and other projects in the Middle East and Jordan. So you kind of have a mapping, sort of intimacy with the site, and there's been a lot of discussions. So we're all involved in one way or another, and this is a classic site, and it gives people a lot of hope because I often hear this said in conversation: if you can do it there, you can do it anywhere. So I feel confident, and I've heard that so many times, and that's been one of the biggest achievements for me on this site is to give people hope. I mean, it always is to give people hope. And how we started was anti-evaporation, really. The first thing I had to do was set up design to reduce the evaporation because it's all about evaporation. Drylands are all about more evaporation than moisture, more evaporation than precipitation, which includes not just rain, but includes condensation drip. But if you haven't got any vegetation, you've hardly got any vegetation drip. But as you build vegetation, you build the drip off the trees, which adds to the overall precipitation. It's not just rainfall. And reducing evaporation is crucial. So shading, at any cost, shading, and then wind buffering to reduce the clothesline effect. It's actually called the clothesline effect. The opposite is the rainforest effect. So to reduce the drying effect of wind, to increase shade, to add organic matter, which comes with the hardy trees or whatever you have to use to get those previous effects of shade and wind buffering. And then the organic matter starts to build soil life starts to increase, and you go through your super hardy pioneers if it's a very hardy site like this one. This one was just rock and dust. This one's awful. It was one of the worst sites we've ever worked on.
What were some of the greatest challenges, Geoff?
The west of the sun was awful because we're actually a west-facing site. We face the west towards what the world knows as the West Bank in Palestine. It's just behind you, except it's a glary, sort of dusty day. But we can see the West Bank behind us. Behind Sam is the West Bank. And as it goes dark, you can see the lights of Jerusalem and Jericho's just across the other side of the valley. So the West Bank actually faces east. That's a sensible site to settle in the Northern Hemisphere deserts because you're away from the setting sun. Where we are is we're facing west. We're facing the west so that the sunset that's setting right now is glaring straight at our slope. So very hard to reduce the evaporation and to extend moisture. And Eric was there in the early days. When Eric was there wasn't a lot of shade when you were here, was there, Eric?
No, there was almost no shade unless we went in the little concrete building that was on site.
Yeah, and Eric was even using recycled plastic bottles to extend the drippers to drip water into the soil. And I used to find them. I think they're all gone, but they were used to find Eric's recycled plastic bottles clipped over drip lines to extend moisture into the soil to get moisture in quicker. But we
found one last year. They're still coming out.
They're sort of under mulch now, and most of the trees were extremely aggressively spiky, weren't they, Eric?
Yeah, they were mostly the only thing on site was spiky mesquite trees, and that's what I was trying to extend the irrigation to. Other than some of the few date palms and some kind of other softer legumes that we're trying to get established.
Well, my main aim initially was just to get shade at any cost, and even though it meant lots of impaling spikes from mesquite being the genus Prosopis, and it's very aggressive and often hated for its success, but its deep taproot gets into moisture which other trees can't get. And gradually we've worked our fertility up, or the site's worked its fertility up. We've facilitated that, and we've gone past mesquite. We're trying to knock out the last few root zones that keep regenerating, and we just aggressively prune them, not let them grow any leaves. And we've mostly gone to other legumes, particularly Lucina is one of our main fast carbon pathways, and we've got long-term legumes. Now, when was your first engagement with it, Ben? Your first mapping with me must have been quite early. About last 8 years we've been mapping together, yeah?
Yeah, sneaking up on 9 now. But,
Right.
I don't know. Early on, I was kind of stalking you a bit. Honestly, just trying to analyze from afar what was going on in your project areas, and aside from doing your New South Wales, which fortunately had pretty good quality data, I could see more details. Your site there is a bit harder on a micro scale to zoom in. The data is not so clear at that scale, but overall it's deeply fascinating how your little site there is a beacon in many ways, both inspirationally, but when you zoom in Google Earth and see how it's responded to your activities there, and how you've tapped into the water, whether it be from just collecting the rainwater, all the way down to Eric's little 2-liter bottles in your earthworks. It's definitely proof is in the pudding, and inspirational for sure.
Yeah, if we did a timeline of Google Earth over the different shots on Google Earth, if you go back to where we started and then come through, you can really see it turn into a green little blob in the landscape. And it's pretty obvious if you get up the hill and look at it. And it's not all obvious that it's food. It's a food forest, and in these drylands, you only have very small gardens, the smallest garden clearings in your food forests in this zone, because you need so much shade. And in summer, it's all shade. You need to garden in the shade. You can't garden in the full sun sustainably here, because you just have to use too much water. Water is crucial. We don't get water coming through the mains more than about 2 hours a week. So our water is delivered by tanker, and our swales actually input a lot of water back to the aquifer. So we repay the aquifer for what we use, and that we teach. A lot of people don't understand that. But from a design perspective, everything was about water infiltration to the site. Everything was about creating shade and organic matter to hold water close to the surface, and minimize all the water that we inputted into the site, so that we could extend it as far as possible. Water extension through reducing evaporation. That's our big thing. And that's what's built this site, really. And without really good mapping, it would have been more difficult. The mapping has made all the difference. And now, at last, we can get more. We actually have private companies here in Jordan that will fly LiDAR drones. So at last, through the whole of the Middle East, we can get better mapping. Everybody's realized the more accurate the map, the quicker and more efficiently we can design. And I've had that issue this week with larger designs on site where people have made classic mistakes they're going to have to change because they didn't get the good maps.
That's a juxtaposing example, Geoff. Having done this site small, gotten it right from the beginning, and extended the success, and then that job in Mafraq. Do you want to tell the audience a bit about that job in Mafraq?
Well, it's one we're just starting, and at last we've got a lot of support from the Royal Botanic Garden and the royal family. So we have a 70-hectare site that's under landscape rehabilitation. There's 13 gabions in construction now, and backflood swales off the silt fields, which is one of the most tricky things to do, is a backflood swale off a silt field behind a gabion, because the height of the spillway on the gabion has to be halfway between the bottom of the swale trench and the top of the swale wall. So the swale wall has to be higher than the spillway, but the spillway has to be, well, the swale trench has to be set so it's lower than the spillway, so the swale will flood and absorb some of the impact, but also rehydrate large lengths of landscape on contour before the overflow goes over the spillway overflow. That's tricky. And it was just taken for granted. It was easy and wasn't something that people understood. I went to visit the site this week after a bit of an absence, and they built the swale, rock wall swales uphill, going uphill at quite a rise. I mean, hundreds of meters has to be dismantled and pulled back on contour. When we got some survey kit on site, and actually now they brought in a surveyor with a what they call a Tyndall, right? It's a GPS surveying staff, and we surveyed out kilometers of swale on contour, and from actually working with the clients and showing them the difference, that was enough to convince them, oh my goodness, how much water are we going to pick up? And my answer was, all of it. And then they looked at it and went, oh, this is up in the mountain ranges northeast of Jordan, close to the Syrian border. You can see the mountains of Syria in the distance. It's up near a place called Erbil. It's in the northeast of Jordan. And they quickly, they're clever people, but they just got it wrong. They just accept, oh, it's just, like earthworks, it's just farm work. They didn't get it, right? And I went up there and spent a whole day, must have walked about 6 kilometers, surveying with the surveyor. Luckily, we got this GPS survey tool, which allowed us to do it fast. We had no rocks. We had no trees. There is no trees on this site. It is all rock. It's rock field. It was.
So how far? Off?
Sorry, one second. This is classic because this site, the gentleman's father is a very old man now, remembers the tree trunks lying on the ground. He doesn't remember the trees. The tree trunks were left by the Turkish 100 years ago when they cut most of the trees for the railway. It was a forest. And of course, I thought about that. And what happened was, you can imagine, there's this forested drylands up in the mountains. It gets 170 mil of rain, which we worked out is 70 million litres of water falls on it, 70 million litres. The shepherds would have thought, oh, wow, look at all this green grass growing in winter. It's like we've improved the grazing so much by cutting the forest. Let's get more animals. But it goes dry in summer. It's classic Mediterranean, wet and green in winter, dry in summer, but the trees would have been green and shading the ground, reducing the evaporation, allowing some condensation. When you cut it all down, initially it looks like, wow, we've got such better pasture. Let's graze more animals. Year after year, they've grazed more animals, and the stones have just grown out of the ridgelines. It looks like the whole thing's a rock field, and all the good soil's gone to the bottom. There's just a little bit left. And what the shepherds have done, not realizing, because it's gone so slowly over time, is they've just reduced their flocks. there are people still grazing across the land. It said I was there. There was probably 80 or 90 sheep and goats just arrived over the horizon around sunset. Well, we're fencing. They are fencing the whole site with a 2.5 meter fence to set the example. It cannot be grazed from now on, and we're putting in the rehabilitation landscape. This is definitely regenerative agricultural rebuild. So we're foresting multiple contour forests, and we'll build back grazing in between, which will have to be very carefully managed. But by walking the contour lines with the client, they got it. They actually, I saw the realization in their mind when they realized, oh, how much water are we catching? And I literally, that's all of it. We're going to catch every single bit we can because the swales overlap. They connect from one gabion to the next around ridge lines. There's one section with 3 gabions connected by swales. And they were miles out, Ben. They were miles out. They were going uphill at like 7 to 1.
Oh my God.
And
that's what I was wondering. I was going to ask you, like, so how much investment did they put into erecting that wall there?
I don't know. They were they're Egyptian rock wall builders, and they were able to do 6 workers were doing gabion cages 1 meter by 1 meter by 2 meter, and in 6 weeks they'd done 150.
Oh my God, they're in the wrong business. They should be working at like theme water parks, building slides.
Yeah,
you know, it's like the concept of catching water and slowly dropping it if you want. I mean, if you're working, it's one thing to be in your backyard with a A-frame or a water level, but really when you step into the larger landscapes, if you don't have if you don't have a handle on that, it's going to cost you dearly.
You would have laughed.
Oh.
I didn't have a site level with me. I was so frustrated. I got a plastic bottle, a 1 liter plastic bottle that was half empty, and I held it up and I looked over the water line, and I got the client to look at me. I looked over the water line at the client. He's on one side, I'm on the other. I said, "You see me on the other side? What we're looking at is the level surface of water. Now turn it round and look at your rock wall. See how far out of level it is. Do you see what I'm talking about here? This is the surface of water. It is level. We're looking through a plastic bottle at each other, eye to eye. Now look at this. I'm going to play a game with you. I made a miniature model of a gabion with the swales, and I checked it with water, and I back flooded it in miniature on the ground in front of him. I said, do you get it? Now watch it soak in, and watch where the water leaves the soak line along contour. That is what we're going to do it kilometer by kilometer. And if you don't get it right now, I can walk off this job because I don't need to be here. I don't need to do this. You either want me to do this or not. I'm doing it that way. We're doing it that way. Or we're not doing it because water going downhill causes erosion, and it's a problem in this landscape. But the problem, classic permaculture, the problem can be the solution. If you soak it in on contour, it rehydrates. Now it's not a problem. It is the solution. From that, we build a forest, and between that, we go back to sustainable. We go to sustainable pasture, better than ever was before. And they've got it. We're rolling.
So that's the very beginning of how you started the Greening the Desert site. It's pretty much exactly that, but in miniature at the Greening the Desert site. Eric, when you got here, seeing a miniature version of what Geoff's just talking about, rockback swales starting to get put in, what are your early memories of the site? What was it like?
It was like Mars, I'd imagine, in my mind, or the moon. I mean, it was just dust everywhere. It was a lot of interesting challenges to get on board with. The language, I didn't speak much Arabic at all. There's a whole cultural sensitivity around male and female interaction, being a traditional Muslim society. That was also interesting to get a hold of. I mean, fortunately, I had spent time with Nadia and her mom in Australia the year previous. I got a bit of schooling in what to do, and I think I remember Geoff saying you get one look for free. So don't go around staring at women. They're going to think you're a weirdo. And then I remember being in the airport waiting to get picked up, and I was just surrounded by, I don't know if it was a school or what, just lots of younger females, and I just remembered thinking to myself, just look at your feet, just look at your feet, just look at your feet. Yeah, so it was a lot to, get a hold of, and there was also a conflict going on in Gaza at that time, so it was really strange and surreal to be working all day and then coming home to the family house, having dinner, and then watching Gaza just getting carpet bombed on the news. And that, yeah, it was I'd say it was a very important lesson for me personally, for many things, for my permaculture appreciation of water, for my appreciation that, just because you think one way to live is normal, it doesn't mean the rest of the world does. And it's perfectly acceptable to have two conflicting ideologies, as long as we can both respect each other's ability to live in peace on the same planet. And then, yeah, the climate too. Fortunately, I was there in what you'd consider the rainy season. I actually was able to have a rain event while I was there, so that was pretty amazing to see.
Eric, watching Gaza get carpet bombed in those early days, coming from your American worldview, what was that like? How did it change you, and how did it shape you?
I think it definitely. I think I was, heading that way already for other reasons, but it definitely kind of removed the facade of how disingenuous and, straight up lying sometimes the media in America is. And they're pushing a narrative. They're not there to tell you the truth. And so it really kind of pissed me off and, made me realize how much false information I've been fed. Like, particularly when I told people I was going to Jordan, their first reaction was like, why? Like, it's dangerous there. Why would you do that? And then when I got there, I couldn't have felt safer, to be honest. And the people couldn't have been more welcoming. Since I didn't speak any Arabic, and I certainly couldn't read Arabic, so I'd go to the shop to buy stuff. I would just hold out money to the shopkeeper, and he would just look through it, pick out what he needed, and just send me on my way. And, you couldn't do that in America. They just take your they'd rob you blind, so, and everyone would invite me in for tea. It's just a stranger walking through their village, and they'd run up to me going, Amariki, and I'd say, yeah. And they'd come, it's like, shy, come in for tea.
What's Riki?
Almost
white boy?
Amariki means American. And yeah. So, honestly, it was just crazy to think, not too far away, people are getting blown to bits with bombs, and here I am, feeling as safe as could be. And it's just, yeah, it's a strange one for sure. And I think it just shows us that the reality we're fed is not reality at all.
When you left, did you feel hopeful it was going to continue?
Yeah, I think so. I was pretty roughed up, I'd say, at that point, just, physically and emotionally. So it definitely took me some time once I got back and settled back in the US to really appreciate what I was doing. I know it's been my basically reason why there's, you can't have an excuse, right? As I look back at Jordan, and anytime I think anything's difficult now, I go, I remember Jordan. This is easy. So for me, it's just been, the best example of, you really want to do some hard yards, go to Jordan. Everything else there's no excuse why we can't be doing this.
Yeah, my point, there's a realization of proof of concept I remember is when we decided we could knock out the prosopis, what you're talking about, when we could knock out the mesquite, we cut them down. I didn't know what I was going to do with this huge mass of trees, and I come up with this idea of putting them in big, deep pits with manure, because there's a goat and sheep manure around pretty easy, and we just layered it with manure and chopped it up. It was a terrible job. Dropped it in these pits. But the very fact that we could say, I think we can just exclude them now and the leukemia will take over, that was a point when I thought, we've done it. This concept is going to be provable and it's going to continue. And it was a turning point for this site. I realized we'd taken it to another level. But you arrived after that, Sam. That we'd already eliminated the prosopis when you arrived. You arrived 10 years after Eric.
Yeah.
1999. 2019, yeah?
Yeah, I had a very strange privilege of how I arrived to the site. I'd been bought, so I taught my first PDC, full permaculture design course in Greece, and I got this design work all over Greece. But part of my deal was I was going to fly into Tel Aviv and I was going to hitchhike through Palestine and end up at the Greening the Desert site to meet Geoff and teach another PDC, teach practical courses and teach in person with Geoff at the Greening the Desert site. I was 19, and it was all quite big, really. Everything that the life change that you go through. I mean, traveling through the occupied West Bank to Israeli settlements, getting picked up by Israeli settlers, and then landing in Jordan, which is a majority Palestinian refugees as a population, was stark. It was full on. And then hitchhiking, I walked like a good hour and a half or 2 hours through the desert from the Jordan border, walking along irrigation canals and through the monoculture date palms and bananas of the Jordan Valley, kind of getting, I don't know what you wouldn't call it acclimatized, like getting beaten over the head by cultural differences and ecocide, like ecological destruction. And I came across quite a large farmer here who actually knew Geoff quite well. I didn't know that at the time. I got called in by his son for some water, and it was that exact same experience. He saw a white guy wandering along through farmland in the middle of, like, you only see Jordanians. There's no tourism down here. And he was like, what the hell is that? Like, and so it was like worried I'd probably faint and die in a ditch. He was like, water, I was like, yes, please. Yes, please. So he called me over, gave me some water, and we got like chatting, and I'd spent 2 weeks in Palestine and learnt a tiny bit of Arabic. He had a tiny bit of English, and we like traded some words and somehow figured out that he knew Abdullah Jabali, which is a long-term student of Geoff's from the early days here. And they got him on the phone and he could speak English. And so I explained what I was doing and that I was walking through the Greening the Desert site. And so he gave me a lift here, dropped me off at the Greening the Desert site. And it pretty much looks how it does now, that 6 years ago, but smaller. The trees were smaller. You'd already pretty much phased out all the prosopis, already pretty much phased out all the spiky trees. And it was already tangibly very much the ecological reality that it is now, just smaller. Ever since, we've been charging further and further forward. We've had some pivotal introductions of the sea purslane, which has completely changed the landscape, made it extremely green on the ground, which like contradicts what you're saying about about Mediterranean climate. It's almost like if the Mediterranean climate stood on its head, that would be sea purslane. It's like completely different scenario. And then the site itself as well has just become, I guess it's become fairly well known. And at that time, that year that I came, there were 60 students on the PDC, 60 students from 30 different countries, which I think was the biggest that Greening the Desert had that year that I came, just before COVID, just before Gaza, just before everything went to crap. It was, and so it goes to show that there aren't people coming necessarily, but how much this is in the world psyche now. How much people understand and know that, yes, the desert can in fact be greened because of this site, because of this little example, the ecological reality of what it takes. I mean, it was only 10 years in, and it was very visible that the desert had been greened. It was a success. It was done. 10 years. It took 10 years to green this little patch of desert. Imagine if people with resources, if governments took it seriously, how quickly we could run towards the greening of the world's deserts. I mean, Geoff, watching that evolution over time, going from bare desert to seeing the desert green now, What level of confidence does that give you for the world's deserts?
If we think they're listening, the potential to extend is endless. We won't green everything, but we'll green specific spots, and much better ones than this. You wouldn't choose this. It's just been good because it's such a bad site. So that's good as a primary example. But going forward into better, larger, specific landscapes in deserts, I don't think people could actually imagine what's possible. They just can't really imagine it. We're now working on diversifying date palms in Saudi, and we have a year to get a result, but boy, we have a different set of kit. I mean, we have large-scale kit, a different thing. And we've just started that new job. But I just hope that, and the new job in Jordan, rehabilitating landscape, when you look at how much landscape is like that job in Mafraq, there's work forever. There's work forever across the world's deserts. I mean, it's going to be a long time, but we could do so much. And people say to me, I get it every week. Oh, there's deserts in Jordan, there's deserts in Australia. You could be working here. Well, yeah, right. Well, invite us then, because we only work on invitation. We're not funded all this. I volunteer here. I've always volunteered, but I had to set it up so that I could volunteer, but I can't do that everywhere. We get invited or we get employed as consultants to do this, and we can consult on this. We can consult on main large areas, whole deserts. I mean, we can do the whole continents if you wanted. It's just a matter of mapping and designing and getting and directing the implementation. And the scale doesn't matter. Doesn't scare me at all. 1,000,000 square kilometers, I'll go for it. But I often wonder, I mean, Ben, you came to permaculture originally from a American military background, and here you are helping us at a distance in the Middle East. And how does that feel to you from serving, being in service to your country, and then here we are in a conflictual zone where your country's been involved in a lot of it, and we're trying to repair. We're coming in with a potential peace army of followers. Like it's an army of peace landscape designers who can come in and not bomb a country but rehabilitate a country.
Sincerely too. And a lot of the NGOs out there, I'm sure you can speak to. I mean, you already gave an example of your earlier project of success there in greening the desert, but just for them to drop the ball or not show up at all, just for photo ops, versus the reality of permaculture designers going into, whether it's a natural disaster or a war-torn society or a city or town, and be able to reboot them, oftentimes better than where they were.
I think it brings up a important point that particularly people new to permaculture don't realize is people aren't just showing up with Brinks trucks of cash saying, please go fix the world. Like if you want to do something, stop expecting the people in charge to do it for you. You got to make the initiative yourself.
It's funny, the word permaculture, permanent culture, to set up a permanent agriculture or a permanent culture doesn't work with a 3-year funded model. I mean, that 3 years is not enough permanence in these desperate situations to suddenly say, oh, well, I'll give you 3 years and set up a permanent system. I mean, it's a little bit short up, even if you're really well funded, and we're rarely that well funded. If we're well funded 5 to 10 years and we've got permanence, and that's not long to work to produce a permanent product. A lot of people don't want permanence. They want permanent aid so that they're permanently funded through aid, or they've got a permanent employment through aid. The idea of aid should be to be unemployed, to be redundant. Right? That's the ultimate aid. And we do need a Peace Corps. I mean, people will have faith in what we're doing. It doesn't matter what religion you follow in discipline or how you want to behave yourself religiously, but you can have a faith beyond religion to I have faith in being able to rehabilitate the landscape, to be able to create a permanent system for humanity. I think we have to encourage our followers to say, I'll join your system, I'll join your peace core of permaculture engagement. And I can do it because I totally have faith in what you're doing. You've established systems like Green in the Desert and many others around the world. There are many people who've set up permanent systems, and we can have faith that we can do it. It's more than hope. It's actually, I believe, I have faith in you. I'll put my heart and soul into helping any way I can. We can help people set up systems like this. That's what we're good at. We can help you set up, no matter how small, no matter how big. And you know the military ability. I mean, how does that feel, Ben? Like when you've been in the military and you've seen how much ability they have.
Yeah.
If we could get the military funding and the military equipment to do what we do, it would speed things up, don't you reckon? You know.
Well, a lot of people, they join the military because they want to like serve, you know, and to protect and serve, and you know, it's a false context when you look behind what really goes on in military operations, and you can look back in time at the most highly decorated Marine who testified in front of Congress and told the truth about, you know, he was just a gangster for people with money. So going into locations and dominating from the resources, it's been the game. It's been the game for a long time. It's, you know, this peace through strength and bombing your way into the affection of the world is it's counterproductive. And being in for 8 years and just being exposed to whatever propaganda, not really thinking too deeply, and all of that really changed when I got out in 2006 and started looking around, like I was saying. But one of the people that, you know, I really need to bring up and mention who helped kind of peel back this was Ron Paul, and he ran for president back in 2008. And we should pause and reflect what he said. This was back in 2009. He said, "What if our foreign policy of the past century is deeply flawed and has not served our national security interests? What if we wake up one day and realize that the terrorist threat is a predictable consequence of our meddling in the affairs of others and has nothing to do with us being free and prosperous? What if propping up repressive regimes in the Middle East endangers both the United States and Israel? What if occupying countries like Iraq and Afghanistan and bombing Pakistan is directly related to the hatred directed towards us and has nothing to do with supporting our freedoms? What if someday it dawns on us that losing over 5,000 American military personnel in the Middle East since 9/11, and mind you, this is back in 2009, is not a good trade-off for the loss of nearly 3,000 American civilians on 9/11? What if it is finally realized that war and military spending is always destructive to the economy? What if all wartime spending is paid for through the deceitful and evil process of inflating and borrowing? What if we finally see that wartime conditions always undermine personal liberty? Look at what's going on now, you know, and how they're moving on that personal liberty front. Yeah. What if conservatives who preach small government wake up and realize that our interventionist foreign policy provides the greatest incentive to expand the government? What if conservatives understood once again that their only logical position is to reject military intervention and managing an empire throughout the world? What if the American people woke up and understood that the official reasons for going to war are almost always based on lies and promoted by war propaganda in order to serve special interests? What if we as a nation came to realize that the quest for empire eventually destroys all great nations? What if Obama has no intention of leaving Iraq? What if the military draft is being planned for the wars that will spread in our foreign policy if our foreign policy is not changed? And look at what they've done as far as drafts goes. Like they've put in place that they will draft both our sons and our daughters. And I won't stand for that, but what if the American people learned that the truth that our foreign policy has nothing to do with national security and that it never changes from one administration to the next? What if war and preparation for war is a racket serving the special interests? And that's what Smedley Butler talked about so long ago. What if President Obama is completely wrong about Afghanistan and it turns out worse than Iraq and Vietnam put together? How did that turn out? Right? I listen to these people that get it right, and they get it right early, and I build a trust in what they say, because how does he predict this, right? It's just like a good, clear understanding of the situation. This guy has it. What if Christianity actually teaches peace and not preventative wars of aggression? What if democracy is found to be superior to bombs and bribes and protecting America? And what happens if my concerns are completely unfounded? Nothing. What happens if my concerns are justified and ignored? And that is exactly where we are today. If like I said, he ran for election, and if you look how he was treated in our electoral process and all of the levers of power that really filter out voices like this, he's a great man, and
And
he continues to speak truth to power, but what he said rings true, and we are in the situation that he predicted, and it's all crap. And somebody that wants to protect and serve not just my country but my fellow man, to be able to switch from ignorance to mindfulness, and then seek an actual path of bettering our situation, our society, and just it's disgusting that we have spent trillions of dollars in such destruction when it would have taken 0.05% of that money and actually changed the game. Like, flip the board. You can't even imagine that world, but we're trying to illustrate what that world could be and advocate for the redirecting of that funds and injecting insanity back into our world.
Yeah.
I wanted to add to that, Ben, because I mean, we work in some pretty hot places. Like, Jordan's not the hottest place where we work. I've been invited to come to Afghanistan and Somalia. I might be in Somalia in a couple of weeks, and Afghanistan in a few months. I've worked in Iraq, and I've seen it on the other side of the spectrum, on the aid side. So after the militaries come in and wiped out infrastructure, destroyed people's lives, and killed people in horrendous numbers. Like, Iraq was not a small amount of people that died. It was a huge amount of civilians, of
Millions.
children, of babies under the age of 500,000 babies under the age of 5. It was not a small thing to happen. And then I arrived after that all happened. I arrived after ISIS. I arrived in the area where ISIS had the strongest power grip in Iraq for the longest time. And I saw US aid and GIZ trucks. They didn't even hide it. They had trucks. USAID, biggest aid organization on the planet, and GIZ, the German version of USAID, second largest aid organization on the planet, were driving around. And I asked one of the local guys, I'm like, what are they doing? Why are these guys driving around? I said, oh, they're looking for oil. They're oil trucks. And they had big radar dishes on them. They had big, all this kit and gear driving around. And that's what the aid money was getting spent on. And you have to extrapolate. Like, so when USAID says we've built this many roads, we've invested in this much infrastructure, where did the roads go from and where did it go to? Was it from oil mines to ports? What infrastructure did they invest in? Was it in oil fields and oil mines? Was it to service the oil fields? And what percentages? And why did they invest in that infrastructure? I mean, I went to a project that was a USAID funded project, and it was displacing people from that part of Iraq where they were driving around, because I worked all across northern Iraq, And where they're looking for oil is in Mosul, where ISIS was really active. Interesting, surprising coincidence. And then where I was working was people from that area that had been displaced into this other area in Iraq. And that had been a USAID-funded project as well, the refugee camp that they were staying in. It's just very interesting parallels to look at. And when you meet people that have been working in the military and they become disillusioned and they realize, wow, what a terrible thing to have been a part of. I want to serve. Then you meet people that have been working in aid. They have the same realization. It's not, they're not separate realizations to have had. Meeting people who have worked in aid, who have worked internationally trying to help people, they have the same realization, realizing they're part of the same problem, that they're part of the same colonialism, they're part of the same grabbing hand. And the solutions beyond that are very few and far between. And I have to say, this is the best one. I haven't seen one better. No. If you guys find one, let me know. I'll jump ship. I'll stop being a permaculturist, no problem. I'm not a loyalist to this at all. Yeah. But this is by far the best thing going.
Okay, can I just pull that into concept a second? Right? Yeah. Because people, they look at what we do here and they go, okay, well, where is all the food? Right? Well, we have a few vegetable gardens with wicking beds that water from underneath. We have a few standard vegetable gardens, and the rest of it is a forest that includes food, which keeps it stable. The realization is, why aren't you producing massive amounts of food in vegetables like everybody else and just trucking it out of the place, with big over-irrigated systems and mass production in a sort of highly fertilized and unsustainable way? Because that's just what they're used to seeing. Then why haven't you done that? Well, what's behind sand there is a stable forest that has a lot of production in it, but not totally production, right? It's actually its ecosystem that's the main demonstration. It wouldn't matter if we had no vegetable gardens in there. The main thing is you can stabilize in a landscape in any climate if you want to put the right design effort into it. Understanding the design that's required for each climate, water, access, structural positions, taking into consideration the landscape form and climate. So what you have there is a stability that goes on indefinitely. Now, that's what actually impresses people when they turn up. They might not even realize it, but there's a kind of wow factor when you walk through a food forest, because it is an ecosystem that's majoring in some degree of production, but not completely. So it starts off by understanding how you work with the living system and the way it takes the sun's energy and converts it into soil through carbon pathways, which are often elements that people are prejudiced about. We started there with prosopis and mesquite, which people are still prejudiced about. They still curse those trees. Now, there's a funny realization that's starting to happen. In our work in Saudi Arabia, we've had to look at totally organic inputs to make compost. We're having to ship organic manure. They want to that the government in Saudi want us to analyze all the inputs to massive amounts of composting. We're talking about 9,000 tons on one farm alone, 17,000 tons on another farm. That takes a lot of creation. And you want to bring manure in. You want to bring other elements in. You want to try and shred carbon from some easily achieved organic matter without it being chemically produced, without it being fertilized with synthetic fertilizer. Right now, all of a sudden, people have said, I don't care what trees you use. I don't care if they're weed trees. I don't care if they're non-native trees. I don't care if they're what you call invasive species. Now, at the same time, here in Jordan, working with the Botanic Garden, which is run by the royal family or a princess of the royal family, who I've worked with for a long time, who hasn't wanted to compromise with me on fast carbon pathways, which are invasive species. It's changed. All of a sudden, it's gone, I don't mind. As long as you try and rebuild the landscape with natives, but if you want to use your favorite invasive species, which are just fast carbon pathways, which we can convert to organic matter through technology and machinery to make compost. And we can even use nitrogen fixing invasive species. So you don't even have to bring in any organic matter. You can produce the nitrogen-rich species on site. They're producing nitrogen with partnerships with microbes, and the microbes are taking the nitrogen from the actual air. This is truly when you convert a landscape and into an organism to itself. It won't do it on its own very easily. It will do it randomly over time. But what we do as designers, we design something that becomes an organism to itself. Now you can produce food forever. Now you can have stability forever. Now you can have soil fertility, even soil creation forever. There's a turning point at this point of desperation in the world. I mean, I think it's the desperation everywhere around. We see a hopelessness. Genocide in 2025? I mean, what is that? Didn't we finish that? That's why we started. It was the genocide of the Second World War that created the United Nations, so we would never have this again. Do you realize that? That's why the United Nations was started, to set rules around the way we behave so we don't ever have genocide again. And now we have, it doesn't mean us. Like, we're the chosen people. We're allowed to genocide. Hello? You're allowed to genocide? I mean, that's what most thinking people are now realizing. And where's the money coming from to do that? Like, where's the weaponry coming from to do that? I think that's changed the mentality of people to say, I think it's a bit of a lame answer that you can't use invasive species that happen to grow really quickly and create lots of carbon for you to fast-track soil creation. I mean, we're well-educated humanity now. We're all on the mobile phone. Everywhere you look, everybody's on the mobile phone almost all the time. If they want to ask the right questions, they can kind of see, if you're making a fuss over invasive species, what about invasive genocide? I mean, it's just lame. It's just lame to even think about a few plants and trees might be a problem when you've got that on the news. Gen Z has allowed us to see that, yeah?
Yeah, native and non-native plants being carpet bombed along with the rest of the animal population and human population into non-existence. Kind of becomes irrelevant, doesn't it? Kind of becomes totally irrelevant.
It's a very entitled position to be in. I think one of the biggest lessons for me from being in Jordan, and that just realizing what an extreme environment, and you're just trying to get anything to grow, and that how much work there is to do in Jordan and around the world. It's basically, it's almost like an excuse not to do anything. Here we go. We only want to fix things if we can use these plants that we think belong here. And it's like, it's such a subjective idea anyway, native. Like, what time frame are you talking about? You go back 50 years, 100 years, 1,000 years, that what would be native changes. So for me, I just think it's an entitled position of nonsense for people who don't want to do anything.
Or time scout into the future and see how many natives and non-natives will have spread across the world anyway. And there'll be just novel ecosystems where they take a minor part once they become stable. I mean, they're part of the stabilizing element. But one thing people say, just throw more water at it. Just don't worry about the water. Exhaust the water table. Throw the chemicals at it. It all works. Why do we bother with this? Why do we bother with this mucking about these complex ecosystem creations? Just throw the water at it. You can do it in Jordan if you throw enormous amounts of water onto an evaporating surface and salt the landscape after a while. Just move over and use another bit of land and use more water and more fertilizer. It'll work. Yeah, it will work. It will work as it destroys everything behind it. We've left from forests to deserts in our footprint of humanity. For a long time, for a very long time, we've left deserts in our footprint where there was once stable ecosystems. It's time to use our intelligence to turn deserts into stable ecosystems. That's really what people need to realize.
Jumping on that, Geoff, as well. I mean, if we were looking at native for greening the desert, or was native for greening the desert? It would have probably been like a mixture of dryland oak, dom, like a type of ziziphus, similar to Chinese date, and maybe even some date palms would have been native to the area. It would have been like a mixture of that sort of a forest. To plant date palms, oak, these sorts of things in this context into bare rock, straight rock, is actually not possible. It's actually not achievable. So if we actually wanted to be purists in the sense of, okay, let's plant natives, let's think about what's native to the context. What's native to this context around the world? What's native to land this degraded and this eroded? If I took any other example anywhere on the planet where human beings have degraded land, we need to take into consideration now that this situation has a different set of native elements. This is not the things that were native here were native to a different situation, and now it's a different context. It's not native anymore. It's not native to this scenario. It was native to topsoils this deep. We now don't have topsoil. It's not native anymore because it can't grow in this situation. We need to use what is native to this situation, which in this scenario is prosopis, it's mesquite, and in other scenarios is other things. And we need to use those things to pioneer back what it was before if we want to go in that direction.
Yeah.
Well, to quote Bill, you can't get back, you can only get forward. So even if we were able to go to a previous ecosystem, everything else has changed too. The soil biology, the companion plants, the whole situation. Like it's just stupidity and fantasy to think you can go backwards. It's like we just got to get forward and stop mucking about.
I think y'all aren't trying hard enough. I think more
Probably.
Water, right? We get some primo fertilizer and really force the situation. We shut down bird migration and wind patterns, lock it down. Then we can focus on the native only. What do you think about that strategy, huh?
And I reckon you've got a job in the World Economic Forum. I reckon so they should sign you up right now, mate.
They're probably sending you a contract right now.
This place is looking more and more like Almería. I was just in southern Spain teaching a course, and I was near Almería, which is the largest amount of plastic houses in the world. You can see it from the moon. And it's the most unnatural landscape you could ever imagine. It's just 100 kilometers of plastic houses with you can't see the soil. So what they've done is they've shut down the rain. It's only irrigation and it's time. It's shut down the wind because it's all inside plastic houses. They've shut down the soil life because it's all plastic covered on the ground, so it's solarized. And they've got their own fertility, which is all timed. Everything's man-made, and they're growing crops that they're shipping into Northern Europe on time, exactly, and it makes money. But it's got the most awful ponds and irrigation systems in there. I nearly went to visit it as a weirdo tourist destination, but I actually looked at it on Street View. I encourage people to go on Google Earth, go into Almería in southern Spain. You can't miss it. It's not far from Malaga. It's just east of Malaga. You can't miss it. It's all plastic. Go in and get Street View. Get your little man on Street View and go for a drive around Almería. If that's how you want to eat, then you are a bloody idiot, right? You're going to end up with calcium poisoning in the brain. And that's where we're all going, whether Alzheimer's is calcium chloride that comes out of the artificial fertilizer. Bill told us about it in 1983. We've all got calcium poisoning, and we're just on the edge of being able to handle it. And that's what degrades the brain. Now, there's no question what the main concentration is, apart from all the other toxicity in our food. Calcium is an issue, but you've got cadmium. Cadmium is the issue. Cadmium chloride is what accumulates in most of our toxic fertilizers, soluble fertilizers, bonded in cadmium salt. You can look that up. But what we've also done, you have to realize, is we've brought in reed beds. So the wastewater from humanity is recycled into our growing systems. It tops up our system here at Green in the Desert. So we've got all our shower water and kitchen water. We've shown people how you can take it through natural biological cleaning by simple reed beds. And there's not a lot of regulations here. There is in Australia. We have reed beds in Zaytuna Farm. In fact, we're regulated in the area of Australia we live in. We have to have reed beds if we live on a rural property. We have to have we have a septic tank that then goes to a reed bed that goes to a leach field. Here at Green in the Desert, we don't have to have a septic tank. We just send the water straight into a reed bed and straight out the other end into fruit trees, and it's clean enough. It's primarily treated to be safe to put straight on as irrigation. We've got people putting these in villages all around us because they realise that that's water you've already paid for. Water's not cheap here. So why aren't we recycling water? And in Australia, at my house, we even recycle black water through reed beds, and it's legal. It's actually legislated. We have to do grey water, but we've got black water as well. So there's no water on my house, black or grey, that doesn't go back into the landscape as an addition to growing systems. But that's quite a wet landscape. Here, that's an enormous addition. Now, on my new job in Mafrac, they're asking for that as well. They're asking for that. Now, I think times are changing. I think you're seeing the tipping point starting to emerge because, whether you get past the plumbing unions in America, which stop you putting in these systems, but it's no less work for the plumbing union. They just need to change their approach. Change is too scary for people, but leaders, heretics who make change. And the new reality is we need more leaders, not necessarily political, just leaders in movements where people want to follow. They have faith in leaders that can make new changes that has to happen. There has to be brave leaders, and that's what makes things work better. It's not, people who just sheep follow everything. Oh, no, I don't want any changes, too scary. Well, I'm sorry, you got to have change because what's happening is bloody awful. And it's stupid. It's absolutely stupid. There's no intelligence in what we're doing. And the reality is coming home. It's everywhere. But the ultimate reality is we've allowed genocide. We've all complained about it, and now I think that's part of the tipping point. The Palestinian people have paid the price, but they've also given us the example of where we definitely don't want to go. So what else is wrong? Lots. And it's the natural world that gives us the answers. The Green of the Desert is in a situation where it would never have naturally been as forested as it is behind Sam. In that landscape, there's more forest there than there would ever have been. There's more green than there would ever have been in history. It's a west-facing slope, facing the hot sunsets just going down now. But we've proven beyond what was originally possible that we can do this. Now, scale it up. We can scale it up. We've got nothing there. We've done this on nothing. We've done this on running a few courses and funded it with, very, 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 very cheap labor, luckily. But take that into Saudi Arabia. Take that into big demonstration sites. Get it moving. We have equipment. We have technology. Shit, we have mapping that we can see every bloody millimeter just about. Like we the layers of our maps where you don't want to make a mistake. Don't worry. We've got the maps. We've got the technology. We have compost turners that make soil like you wouldn't believe. We've been making it by hand. We're still making it by hand. I've been carrying manure into this site today. I'm 71 in December, and I'm still carrying 20, 30 kilos of manure through the food forest and dumping a bag on each tree so that we can make compost. In Saudi Arabia, we're making 19,000 tons on one farm alone. Hello? Isn't it time we sort of thought about this a little bit? The transferable lessons from here have to be scale. It's too late. Now, we could do lots of little ones. You could do loads and loads of little Green in the Deserts. You could do loads of demonstration sites. Wonderful. I love them. Little 2-acre sites, little 1-acre sites, little tiny sites, but scale. has to come, because otherwise we're going to be fed more poison. We're poisoning
and exhaust our water.
Yeah, I mean, water's in deserts. You have to use groundwater. There is no choice. Yes, you can harvest as much rain that comes, but you still have to use groundwater. But you have to put in earthworks to recharge the groundwater you use. Hey, we can see that. The Grace mission can see the aquifers. The satellite technology can see the aquifer recharge. Do we have to wait? Do we have to wait to see it? We haven't got time to wait. It has to happen. Populations are concentrated in cities that have to be fed by sustainable agriculture. There is no choice. This little site we're on here is one of the models. More models are out there. They have to be well documented and extended to some degree of scale. That scale has to be converted to be sustainable scale. If you can't convert the scale to sustainable, you shouldn't be allowed to farm. You should reduce the size to something that can be sustainably scaled, scale at sustainable levels. It's easy enough to gauge. This little site, if it does anything for me, it does that model. There's hope that we can do this. What do you guys reckon?
I think it's not. You go, Eric.
No, I was just going to say, for me, I think we all need to realize what's coming, and if we don't make a change and create a new system, we're all going to be wiped out in the end, right? For me, Gaza is just a dress rehearsal. Like, if you don't think it's coming for all of us in the end, you're not paying attention. So the only system I see to stop that eventuality is permaculture systems everywhere.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I also think, the reality of the situation is greening deserts and doing what we're talking about is, I don't think it's just hopeful. I think it's just an honest reality. It's a fact. It's an ecological fact that we can do it. It's observable truth. It can be done, is being done, and if we decided to do it, great. It would be a great thing to do. However, personally, I'm not in the business of hope. I'm not interested in being hopeful that humanity might do it or might not do it. I think we have personal obligations, ethical obligations to do it. If we don't do it on an individual level, waiting for total sociopaths, total nutcases that are in charge of our common humanity, of our common earth, to do it, we're just waiting for them. I think we're, and we're knowledgeable of this, I think we're just as sociopathic. I think we are, we're just part of it. We're just part of the degradation of our planet. We're just playing a role in the destruction of our planet. And we're not taking an honest role in the positivity of what is possible. Not hopefully possible, but is possible. If we decided to do it, we could and we would, and we can. But that's actually an individual decision to make, not something to sit around and wait for some other group of people or other more powerful group of humanity to decide to do for us, because we've seen that they're very willing to commit genocide, not necessarily to regenerate the planet. And we either are part of that genocide or we decide, no, we want to be part of the solution. And that's a decision to make.
And I think if we fail to rise to that challenge, we've failed our children. And if we don't call out the injustice and horrors that is being perpetrated on humanity, that ultimately we'll all be Palestinian essentially and face what's going on over there. And if you look at who's funding this activity and you look at the technology that's being trialed and tested there, eventually that all will come back. We're no sacred cow in America. It's obvious to me anyway that the government and the corporations are not acting on behalf of our best interests. Not how they feed us, not how they clothe us or house us. On all metrics, they've failed us, and we should know better by now that they're not acting in our best interest. And like I said, we're no sacred cow. And if they're willing to do these things on these people, I wouldn't put it past anything that they would eventually impact us all in the same type of way.
Yeah, I mean, we've given power of the world to people who think humans are a problem. I think that's essentially right. So they want to minimize humanity as much as possible, and we see that differently. We need as many people acting in a positive way as possible. So
all those people throwing orange paint on pictures or gluing their ass to the rose, you're not doing it, folks. Okay, that's not. You need to pick up a shovel and meet people in your hometown positively and like actually make an impact. It's embarrassing.
Because I mean, up to this point, there's no reason for those people in charge not to think that way if we're not making an active contribution towards the regeneration of our planet, towards being positive humanity, which is, again, it's tangible, but it would require a desire and a thirst for it. We would have to want it.
Yeah, I mean, I would have thought the same way before I found permaculture. Permaculture gave me the hope that, oh, there's so much work to do. We actually need as many people as possible working.
And what you all have accomplished there in the greening the desert, I mean, from afar, in my first exposure to permaculture, was such a like, wow, because I felt so scared, worried that the conditions were so, like you couldn't adapt and overcome the things that we were facing. But then when I saw what was accomplished there, that was the flip of the switch that I was all in. And like you said, if anybody knows a better plan or approach to our situation than permaculture, let me know. I'll say my farewells to Geoff, and I will be a loyal subject, and we'll go that route instead. But I've looked pretty hard, man.
Yeah.
I just lost my power on my laptop, so sorry about that, folks. But I'm talking to you on my phone, so if the sound quality's gone down, I'm struggling here at times, but Sammy doing a better job than me. So we're about to wrap up. So, thanks for carrying on in my little bit of absence there. But that's what it's like on the front line. If anybody wants to join us, everybody's welcome. And I think that's what we've got to do. We've got to take on that attitude. Got to get out there and change the world. So, till next time, it's bye from me and it's bye from all these guys.
Cheers.
See you guys.
Cheers.